talk to us a little bit about Bryant Wesco and obviously Sammy Brown. I didn't never really feel like Sammy was that close to being an Oklahoma guy. I know it stings a little bit, but to me, you have to. I think you got to temper your expectations with some of these players, and he was one of those guys I didn't have a huge expectation about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is we all set our expectations with kind of the things that we were hearing about. Hey, Sammy Brown said that this was the best visit that he had ever taken, and then we started giving him Brian Bosworth comparisons, which I'm not gonna lie, which I get it. I understood during the On3 event, he specifically said NIL wasn't really going to be a huge factor into his recruitment. But I'm like, if you're Sammy Brown, there has to be some sort of thing that goes in the back of your mind that says, if I go to Oklahoma, I literally can play the role of Brian Bosworth for this football team and do an endless amount of commercials with him. I mean, if you're any car dealership, you're any big time organization in Oklahoma, you're trying to put Sammy Brown up there with Brian Bosworth. So I don't know if they ever pitched that idea, but that should have been an idea to pitch, right? Because I feel like that could have been a selling point to go to Oklahoma.
Sure.
Yeah, we're not offering you a bunch of money, but look at the potential money you could earn just by coming and playing
kind
here.
of playing that role. Yeah.
You're going to be developed. But ultimately, I think we got our hopes set too high because, one, I think this linebacker room is really, really good. If you look at Clemson, it's really, really good. But this year, they're going to be departing Trenton Simpson and Barrett Carter. So there's going to be a hole at Clemson at linebacker. So with Sammy Brown, it's like, I think at Clemson, it's an instant step into the role, which he's also been there more times than even anybody has even logged on any of the recruiting sites because he's been going to Clemson since he's like in elementary school for camp. So I think we just set up this false narrative in our head that like we had a better shot than we actually did. We were in a third place, maybe a fourth place, but it was a long third. Like you look at the distance between probably Georgia and Oklahoma, and I think it was a pretty big gap. The problem is with Sammy Brown going to Clemson versus Georgia, and I know everybody's like, well, I'd rather him go to Clemson than Georgia is. Well, Georgia's now going to have to amp up their recruiting for another linebacker, and they've had Justin Williams on campus. And I think this is where we have to start focusing now and going, okay, well, how does this now impact Oklahoma recruiting? Well, Justin Williams attends the same high school, is on the same team as one Joseph Jonah Ajonye, who is now I believe, a top 60 prospect in the 247 composite rankings. And so, Georgia's thrown out that offer to JJA.
Oh, I'm sure.
He's really talked up that visit to Georgia.
Yeah.
Justin Williams currently has an official visit set to Georgia on the 23rd. If Georgia now goes and lands Justin Williams, I think it, one, becomes a more attractive destination for Joseph Jonah Ajonye. But two, if maybe he's still not sold at that time, maybe Joseph Jonah Ajonye commits to Georgia, and now JJA tries to get Justin Williams to commit there. I think this is going to have other ramifications for Oklahoma on the recruiting trail. And unfortunately, I think it puts Oklahoma behind the 8 ball for a really talented defensive lineman in the recruiting trail. We'll have to see exactly, though, just what this relationship with Todd Bates looks like for JJA, and if Oklahoma can continue to leverage that. Hopefully, getting him on campus for an official visit can maybe re-secure those ties with Oklahoma. But I'm not going to lie, Sammy Brown going to Clemson has scared me a little bit with how Georgia's pursuit is going to be for Justin Williams.
That makes a lot of sense, and I get what you're talking about. And you can a lot of these, you see a lot of this going on, and it always has. But with recruiting, familiarity is a good thing for a lot of these kids. They just know that. You know what I mean? That just seems like one of the things that's very important when you start thinking about that familiarity. They're going to go after some of these teammates, guys they played with, guys they trust, and that linebacker defensive line. We talked about it last night on the show, right? There's that relationship between those two positions. One feeds the other one. You know what I mean? And one, if you've got a guy like JJA that can, plug up that inside part that and take up blockers, that allows linebackers to move freely and be able to make plays. So, the beauty of we talked about this a lot. The D linemen, they don't always get a bunch of sacks or a bunch of, measurables as far as that goes, but they are so important for those linebackers. And if he's already playing with JJA, why would you not want to make that move,
And for Georgia, I know a lot of people go, well, hey, Georgia offered JJA over after Oklahoma offered him, after he'd taken a visit to Oklahoma. And I'll say this. Georgia's in a lot better of position to not offer kids than Oklahoma is at the start, because for Georgia, they have a 5-star defensive lineman in their state, in Edric Houston. Maybe for a while they thought they were in a good position for him and a couple other guys. Maybe now all of a sudden, maybe they think, well, we don't feel as good about Edric Houston, so maybe we need to throw another offer out to another top-tier defensive lineman to kind of give us a gap if we miss Edric Houston, which is a very good possibility. Edric Houston could end up at Clemson or Alabama. Both are very viable places for him. I think it's down between those 3 schools for him. So if you look at Georgia, I think they're doing this a little bit strategically. One, because they know they might miss on Houston, but 2, they know they need another linebacker. And I know some people will go, hey, well, they have a 5-star linebacker in DeMarcus Riddick. Well, that's true, but where's Riddick from? He's from Alabama. And there has been a lot of talk about how he might flip to Alabama. That's the truth. I don't think Georgia wants to go in to this cycle without a 5-star linebacker, especially after losing Nolan Smith and guys like that into the draft. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how Sammy Brown impacts the loss for Oklahoma, because Oklahoma potentially could lose another guy out of this. Potentially one that actually hurts a little more than Sammy Brown, because JJA, I think, is a guy that was almost a lock for Oklahoma for a while until he got on the campus of Georgia.
Yeah. And that's where the beauty of it is where we really feel like listen, we can talk about losing guys like that or because there's any number of things that could happen. And I agree with you. It's easy to make that connection. What I would also say is that Oklahoma's in on a lot of these guys, those defensive line guys. You don't want to see them losing a bunch of them. I know, especially after Za'Davian Sims chose Oregon. Another one of those guys for me, I didn't really ever feel like that was going to be as big a problem. Now, Matt, I understand this. I definitely understand what you're talking about. But I would tell you that in my whole thing is, and I know that I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the truth of it is you guys, we all have to realize that we're still December's a ways away. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. Do you want to see some of these? To me, I feel like last year, you remember right around this time, early part of June, everybody's a little worried that, you only have a few, right? That are even have committed, and they're not these 5-star guys. Well, that's because they haven't committed anywhere yet, a lot of them. And I still think David Stone is probably I know you were talking about it the other day. You want to give your percentage here. I feel like he's definitely right on the cusp of being an Oklahoma guy. I still feel the same way about Williams Nwaneri as well. And even though, my favorite of these guys has been Nigel Smith, but I'm concerned, like you were talking about last night, Ohio State on that one. But I see them still getting 2 to 3 of these guys, right? They're going to, there's the guy from Louisiana. It's
Dominic McKinley.
Dominic McKinley, yes. What are your thoughts about that?
Personally, I don't think Oklahoma is as in a bad a position as people think. People are saying, hey, I'm worried OU's missing on some players. Is OU really missing if the guys never came on? If OU is getting these guys on for OVs and then they never commit, all of a sudden then I'm worried, because I'm like, your OV is supposed to be the weekend, right? That's supposed to be the weekend that you roll out the red carpet for recruit. That's supposed to be your pitch. Unfortunately, Bryant Wesco never made it on for an OV. And his sister left campus. So I don't think maybe the sister was as big of a factor into that, because, well, she's at SMU and he's at Clemson. So you never know. Maybe they could flip Bryant Wesco. Maybe Bryant Wesco thinks to himself here in a couple weeks, in a couple months, and says, hey, I made this decision too quickly. I made an impulse decision. I need to go out there and actually take the other visits and make sure I made the right decision before he ends up at, which I don't even know if he can stay at Clemson at that point, because he'd be breaking Dabo's policy, which is the same as BV's.
Same as BV's policy.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes
Right.
to the defensive lineman, I think you're right. Like I'm pretty much on the belief that Stone should be committing here pretty quickly. I mean, if you look at everything he's doing, you read the tea leaves.
Right.
He's going to be in Oklahoma this weekend, not for an official, but for an unofficial, to be here with Winery and some of these other recruits. He'll be here next weekend for the Champion Barbecue, and that's going to be so far his last scheduled official visit. Now, is it because he hasn't gotten a chance to get one scheduled with A&M? I am under the impression that if he wanted to take an official visit to A&M, A&M would have made it happen already. So the fact that there's not any other official visits on the schedule yet for him after Champion Barbecue, that leads me to believe that potentially we could be seeing a commitment come down for David Stone here pretty quickly. Maybe even by the end of the month, maybe even at the Champion Barbecue. Might be a stretch for the Champion Barbecue, but I think we're going to see one here pretty quickly from him. But as far as the rest of the defensive line goes, I talked about it with you. If let's say you only land David Stone and Winery, and I mean, you could even take Winery out of this mix, but let's just say you land David Stone and you get Jaden Jackson, you get who's the other guys? Alex January from Duncanville. You get a Tyler Moore, one of the unranked defensive linemen in the composite. That's still a really good defensive line class. You might not get all the 5 stars in the world that you dreamed of. And maybe
it's historical if you're Oklahoma.